We have seen evidences of Satan's hostility toward the people of God throughout the centuries, as Christians have suffered many withering attacks and persecution from various evil regimes. But Jesus and his apostles repeatedly warned that Satan would employ a far more subtle and devastating strategy in his war against Christendom. They prophesied in no uncertain terms that deceivers would arise from inside the church and lead many astray. They described these false teachers in some of the strongest language possible: wolves in sheep's clothing, men devoid of the Spirit, irrational animals, shepherds feeding themselves, blots and blemishes. Are you getting the picture? An apathetic and worldly-minded church is the perfect breeding ground for false teachings to thrive. And this is exactly what Scripture predicts for the last days. The church seems to be teeming with deceivers who have the natural ability to look good on the outside while they are inwardly full of deception and corruption. The type of teaching Christians subject themselves to is of extreme importance, because what we believe plays a huge part in the way we live our lives, and our behavior is what determines our eternal destinies. One of the reasons false teachings have been able to flourish in the American church is because it has become an enterprise system functioning in a similar way as show business. Just like talented musicians, actors, and broadcasters tend to rise to the top in the entertainment realm, so do gifted preachers, writers, and Christian music artists in the church. Venues such as radio, television, and the internet have made it possible for the Christian community to have access to the very best music, the most gifted preaching, and the most interesting talk shows. Any talented, charismatic, and ambitious Christian can forge a very successful career in the American church. The Christian public's fascination with charisma and talent has opened the door for a very subtle deception to creep into the church. The danger we face is not so much from teachers who reject the orthodox teachings of Christianity. The deception in the church today is more subtle than that. It comes from preachers who water down the fire of true Christianity. It comes from teachers who refuse to confront worldliness, carnality, and even sin. It comes from authors who explain away clear-cut biblical warnings about sinful behavior. It comes from musicians who offer exhilarating performances that elicit devotion to themselves rather than to God. When Jesus sought disciples to himself, he didn't go on a talent search to find the most capable communicators. He sought men who would deny themselves for the sake of others. He went looking for those who would serve him rather than using ministry to serve themselves. He wasn't interested in talent. He was interested in brokenness, humility, and sacrificial love. The attributes of Christian leadership are those the Lord laid down in the Sermon on the Mount. The first characteristic of a citizen of his kingdom is poverty of spirit, the very opposite of the person who's full of himself and his talents. Rather than celebrate his accomplishments, he mourns over the fact that he isn't more like Christ. Rather than living a purpose-driven life, he walks in the meekness of someone who only does what God tells him to do. Rather than being satisfied with an outward image of righteousness, he hungers for a righteousness that cleanses the heart. Rather than being preoccupied by what the world offers, he lays his life down in mercy for those in need. Rather than causing strife with others, he brings a sense of peace into every setting. In God's economy, talent is secondary to Christ-like character. Someone once said that our giftings often serve as God's rivals. There is much truth in that statement. This is why a person's talent typically must be put to death before the Lord can accomplish much good out of it. Now let me get back to the issue of false teachers. Since the Christian community has, by and large, traded godly attributes for human talent, we have made it possible for gifted influencers to be given positions of prominence. While we do expect such people to keep their behavior and teachings within the framework of the primary tenets of the faith, we allow a great deal of latitude to go unchecked beneath the surface. There is one more tendency American Christians have that should be noted. Paul described the atmosphere in the church of the last days when he told Timothy, "A time will come when some will no longer tolerate sound teaching. Instead, they will live by their own desires. They'll scratch their itching ears by surrounding themselves with teachers who approve of their lifestyles and tell them what they want to hear. They will turn away from the real truth you have to offer because they prefer the sound of fables and myths." He was describing the Christian community that we call home, dear ones. Let's face it, our flesh wants the easy path. We prefer teachers who will flatter us about how godly we are and promise us a comfortable Christianity that fits in rather nicely with our American prosperity. The life of self-denial that Jesus called for from his followers is not what Americans want to hear about. Forgiving those who have hurt or offended us, humbling ourselves with those around us, incorporating a meaningful daily devotional life, sacrificing our comforts and pleasures for the sake of those in need, and actually treating with love those who have despitefully used us are not the sort of things we had in mind when we signed up to be followers of Christ. And this is precisely why the church doesn't have the spiritual discernment to detect the subtle falsehoods Satan has woven into postmodern Christianity. That kind of discernment does not come cheaply. It is only for those who truly walk with Christ and are willing to live the life he laid down for his followers. Live the Christ life, and your eyes will be open to see what is going on around you.
What I remember more from the youth group messages was just like a lot of teaching about the historical facts. So you'd learn a lot of anecdotes about what the culture was like, or about, just different things like the different laws in the Old Testament and all that. And so there wasn't a lot of confrontation. And it actually, again, not putting it on my church, but what I look back on is it really developed a lot of pride in my heart. Like, I started to know stuff, and I would know more than other people who went to other churches. And so it didn't confront my sin. It actually kind of ended up building it up because no one was ever kind of really talking about the truth.